Thank you for joining us and welcome to another edition of Answers Network. I'm your host, Alan Cardoza. And for those of you that have been listening, sending in questions and comments, thank you so much. And please continue, help spread the word that every Monday from 11 a.m. to noon Pacific time, this show will bring on special guests that can inspire, educate, and in some cases entertain, while bringing answers and options to making our lives happier, healthier, and more successful. Now, I'd really appreciate it if you would all do me a big favor. Please forward one of our shows to your social media group and to someone you know who can benefit from a particular subject. This is one powerful way that we together can make a positive influence in the world. And I can guarantee you that if you want to send this out to people, this is a subject that we can all benefit from. Our topic today is, what is the mystery of life energy? Our guest, Dr. Rick Leskowitz, has literally written the book on it. He recently retired after serving as a consultant psychiatrist for over 25 years with the pain management program at Spaulding Rehabilitation Hospital in Boston, where he also founded the Integrative Medicine Task Force. He holds an appointment at Harvard Medical School and has studied energy healing, meditation, and hypnosis for over 40 years, presenting workshops nationally and internationally on the integration of subtle energy techniques and theories with allopathic medical, with an allopathic medical model. Now, Rick has written widely for medical and lay audiences, with over 50 articles being published in leading scientific journals. His documentary film about group energies in sports, it's called The Joy of Socks, Weird Science, and the Power of Intention, was broadcast on PBS stations nationwide. His latest book, Mystery of Life Energy, is a groundbreaking work that unveils the abundant evidence supporting the existence and impact of the biofield, a concept that's revolutionizing our understanding of life energy and takes readers on a riveting journey through the various expressions of life energy, from the personal level of individual healing to the vast, interconnected realm of global consciousness. Rick, welcome to Answers Network.
Thank you, Alan. I'm glad to be here, and thanks for the invitation to be here.
Well, you're very welcome. It's something that I am very interested in. And although in the introduction I referred to the allopathic medical model, so I didn't know what that was. So can you explain what that is and why it's so important?
Well, I didn't know what it was either when I started medical school, because it's one of these jargon words that medicine just loves. The best preparation for medical school would have been to take Latin and Greek in high school, because that's the vocabulary. So allopathic is a word to describe one particular approach to health and illness. And it's made up of two words, allo meaning other or something different, and pathic meaning, pain and pathology and like that. So in medicine, we tend to treat symptoms as other, and we prescribe medicines that aren't part of the body, in contrast to homeopathic medicine, which is, you probably know the phrase, like cures like. So homeo meaning homo, like as. So it's the contrast that we use opposites to treat symptoms. And there's a lot of implications for that I can go into it at some point if you'd like, because it really is, it's the strength of the model and it's the weakness of the model, because it really,
and actually I would love to have you go into it, because there is so much information, and again, I love the fact that we have the internet and we have so much information at our fingertips.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it also means that we have a lot of disinformation that's out there, and so there's information on both of these subjects that you've just mentioned. So I would love to have you go deeper into that.
Well, I think the main problem, if you will, it's a strength, but it's also a problem with Western medicine, is that we view human beings as bodies that are machines. We're very complicated machines, but sort of the promise is, if you break it down into the component parts. You can find some part that's broken. You can repair it, replace it, fix it, put it all back together, and everything will be fine again. And then a lot of times that does work. I tore a ligament in my knee, and I tried to meditate for about a day, and that didn't work. So I went to the surgeon, and he fixed the broken part literally. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of good that comes from that, but it misses out on what I think is the key ingredient, which is this invisible healing energy. And it's ironic in a way that every single healing tradition around the world, except for ours, talks about this invisible energy in one form or another. I think people nowadays are aware of, in traditional Chinese medicine, you have qi.
Mhm.
In the yoga tradition, you have prana. And in my book, I list about, I can't even remember now, there's about a dozen or 15 that I mentioned that words are out there. So we tend to be very proud of our accomplishments in the West, but we're an outlier because we've missed what unifies and brings together and synchronizes and coordinates us. And once you acknowledge that, it opens up just doors to many, many other ways of approaching health and illness. And they're not ways in opposition. They work together. That's why the term integrative has been used.
Mhm.
It can be called alternative medicine, which actually is a politically loaded word because it means it's something, it's it's separate from and different than. The way I look at it, the way people look at it now is these approaches like acupuncture or meditation can be integrated into the greater whole and give more options to patients to choose from. And that leads to greater healing power.
Yeah, I am so right with you in regards to that. But you mentioned a little bit earlier going to medical school. When you're going to medical school, um, I guess there's probably two questions here. How did you become interested in this subject when, from what you're saying, they're not teaching you these same things? And then the second follow-up question is, why?
Well, I guess, I'm retired now, so I've had the opportunity to step away from the hustle bustle of daily practice and all, and sitting back and looking at things. I had a chance to reflect on my career trajectory, and a lot of that went into writing the book because the things that I went through, the changes that I went through, are kind of mirror what has happened to many other people in our society as a whole. So I grew up in a family that, this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but I would say we worshipped science. My
Hmm.
father's a research scientist, and he looked at the different chemicals that affected immune system in rats and that kind of thing. It was important work, and I really was in awe of it. So I followed in those footsteps. Um, and all the way through college, I was pretty much on board with it, although I had had some experiences with what they were calling altered states of consciousness,
Hmm.
which showed me that there's a lot going on that we don't quite understand, and maybe it's all down to neurotransmitters, but I have a feeling there's something more. But I wasn't really sure. So, medical school seemed like the way to go, and fortunately, I took some time off uh, between college and medical school. I was inspired by my roommate's girlfriend to realize that you don't have to take the next step in the treadmill right away. And that's literally what it was. I stepped off the treadmill, and
Hmm.
I did some traveling to Europe and the Middle East and met my wife, and we traveled to overland to India. So I got to see many different ways of looking at reality. And that I didn't, it wasn't like a spiritual quest, and I didn't go seeking answers. It was just fascinating. I think that's the basic word, was
Hmm.
fascinating. And then when I came back to medical school 2 years later, I was kind of an outlier because I could sort of step back a little bit and ask some questions that the other people weren't asking. I had also learned how to meditate just
Hmm.
before starting medical school, but that was more stress management than spiritual development. So when medical school started, one of the words that kept cropping up, you talk about allopathic and homeopathic. Another one that came up a lot was idiopathic.
Hmm.
A lot of diseases were described by my professors as being idiopathic in nature. And I had to look that one up because I didn't know that one. But it comes from the word, it's related to the word idiot, meaning not knowing. So
Wow.
they found a fancy Greek word to say, we don't know what's going on here. And it's kind of a mixed message because on the one hand, it sounds really impressive. Wow, these guys know what they're talking about. But oh, wait, that means they don't know what they're talking about. So that was kind of the dilemma through medical school. A lot of things just could not be explained. And, it's one thing to say, well, it was in your genetics or something, but that just makes us into like, pre-programmed robots and didn't match my experience. So, and as far as explaining consciousness, forget about it. They didn't have a clue. So, but I did the necessary, and what came closest to matching my interest was psychiatry, because back then it was still focused on thoughts and emotions and interactions. It hadn't yet become the medication focused.
Well, I was just going to say, pharmaceutical companies hadn't figured out how to monetize it yet.
Yeah, it's really changed dramatically from now to then. But what made the big difference, and I did my psychiatry training. I was fortunate to train with one of the founders of what's called psychoneuroimmunology, the way that the mind influences the nervous system to affect our immunity. And that was a good solid foundation, what they were calling mind-body medicine. And, my first job was I worked in the VA, treating post-traumatic stress disorder, not very successfully because we really didn't have good tools. But then a friend of mine, looking back at it, this is a really key event. He asked me if I wanted to go to a lecture. There was a visiting healer from California coming to Boston. And, I was 90% ready to say no, because the word healer triggered me because of my background. I was raised secular, or I guess you'd say culturally Jewish. So healer kind of connoted Jesus and laying on of hands and things that were just very, very foreign to me. But fortunately, I trusted Richard, my friend, and I went to the lecture, and it really changed my life dramatically. It was Reverend Rosalind Briere, who's LA-based healer. She's been doing it for like 50 years now. And she had worked with the medical community in Los Angeles and was very respected because she could see things and sense things and understand things and change things that the doctors couldn't do. And it was because she had the ability to work with this energy. So, 5 minutes into that lecture, I realized that this lady, who did not go to medical school, understood more about health and illness than the people at UMass Medical Center. So fortunately, she came out to Massachusetts twice a year for 5-day intensives. And I started doing that for 6-7 years. I can't remember how many, and learned a lot about what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, that's kind of what it is what's going on behind the scenes that most people can't see, because we can only see, muscles and bones and skin and not the underlying. But there was a lot that really changed. So from that point on, I sort of had a parallel track of understanding what the conventional medical approach was, but also looking into what was the energy dynamics underneath it. And that back then there wasn't much support for it, but it's changed tremendously in the last 10 or 20 years.
How did your colleagues or licensing boards or whatever respond to this part of your belief system?
Well, that's a good question, because back then it was very out there, and I was fortunate. After the VA, I got a job in the pain management program at Spalding Rehab, but some of the work was in the main hospital, but some of it was in an outpatient clinic, 10 miles away, and that the people who were involved in pain management there sort of somehow or other, I don't know what the synchronicity was, but we're all open to this. So we worked on a multidisciplinary team. So there's physical therapists, occupational therapists, psychologists, like that, very open to these approaches. And we began to talk about it and begin to bring in these approaches. The thing about working with chronic pain is that nothing really works. So you have more license to try something. The patients are willing to try anything. Right. And the doctors are saying, well, what the heck, what's the worst that can happen? So we began to do that and built up, good team coherence, but also some sense that this could actually make a difference. And that's what we found over the years. It really does make a difference.
So talk to us a little bit about the changes and the growth, because I know now there's energy healers, all across the world, not just in India or China or whatever, they're
Right.
all across the world. And even from the standpoint now, and especially during COVID, the concept of um, distance energy healers. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, let me talk about the progression because
Okay.
my first non-conventional approach was meditation. And when I
Mhm.
went to medical school in the late 70s, that was a weird thing. It was like almost crackpot, but not quite. Not as bad as vegetarian or something like that. But it was on the fringe. So, at first I would be asking my professors, what effect would meditation have on this disease or that disease?
Mhm.
And the honest answer was nobody knew because there was zero. Well, there were like 2 studies around the world on meditation, and that has changed so much now.
Mhm.
Ironically, I was at UMass, University of Massachusetts Medical School, which was where John Kabat-Zinn was just beginning to share his skills and his information publicly. So he did a few pilot studies, and so now you can find literally thousands of articles on meditation. Energy stuff was sort of the next step. I think acupuncture
Mhm.
um, has gotten very solidly grounded. There's a lot of research in it. You don't 100% understand how it works, but there is uh, physiologic evidence for the acupuncture points and pathways. And
Well,
it's
now with acupuncture or acupressure, isn't this something that goes back like thousands of years in Chinese medicine?
Yeah, that's what's so interesting about it. They didn't rely on electrical devices to measure skin resistance and say, "Oh, here's an acupuncture point." It was they had the ability to sense and they could feel that it's here and not here. And there's actually a tradition of blind acupuncturists who had
Hmm. Yeah,
such great,
actually, yes, I've heard that.
yeah, they have such developed sensitivity in their fingertips that they can map out their fingertips are electrical sensing devices in effect. So right, it does go back thousands of years. And that doesn't mean it's a superstition. And again, in medical school, one of my anatomy professors thought that the only reason acupuncture works in China, it only works in China because everybody has been brainwashed by Chairman Mao to believe that. And it was just starting to get used in America, but now, there's a really big research base. So there is some placebo component to it. So part of it is the positive expectation and hope, but that's part and parcel of every medical intervention. So it adds to it, but at least acupuncture isn't going away. The energy healing part that you alluded to in the question is a little bit different because that's even stranger. I mean, some of the energy approaches, they put their hands on you and in the areas that are hurting, but others, they don't even touch you physically. Like it can be just smoothing out what we would call the aura, or the scientific term now is the biofield. That's the
Hmm.
electromagnetic field. There's actually light photons emitted from the body and other components of it that we don't fully understand, but those are important parts of it too. And so that's just now getting research. There's groups like the Consciousness and Healing Initiative that do biofield research. There are some therapies based on biofield, like energy psychology, that also have an active research base through their Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. So that's getting there. It's almost there. But the distant healing part that you asked about, that's going to take a while because it's so outside the model of, how can my thoughts here affect you across the room, across town, on the other side of the earth? It
Hmm.
doesn't fit. So but there is growing evidence, that it's possible to design a study where the person is there and you're here and you think something about them and they don't know that it's happening, and what effects, what changes does it bring about. So the evidence is growing, and I guess the resistance is growing too, because if that's true, then it means that our mind is not contained in our brain, and that there's some part of our awareness that isn't limited by this physical vehicle, as it's called in some traditions. And there's actually a really good image or metaphor is the mental radio, that the brain is more like a radio that receives, transmissions of some form we don't know. It's not that the neurons sort of grind together and spark out some thoughts. It's that it somehow receives it, and I can't really fully line it up how that happens, but that's my sense of what's really going on.
Yeah, it points towards that thought that there is a universal energy, and that people have the ability to tap into it. I mean, does that sound like the possibility of what's going on?
Yeah, and there's a couple of ways that it could be happening. One is that we all know that the Earth has a magnetic field, and we're all standing on the Earth, so we're all part of the Earth's magnetic field. There's a group also in California. I wonder why all these groups are in California. But the Institute of Heart Math, that initially they were just studying the heart rhythm in the body and the magnetic field around the body. But more recently, they branched out to look at how the body's individual magnetic field influences and is influenced by the Earth's magnetic field. And that's one potential mechanism by which we're all interconnected, because we're all plugged into the same network. And that's a tangible, that we have the physics and to understand the electromagnetic forces. So that's a big part of it. But I don't think it's the whole answer, because, you can sort of see how maybe a certain kind of vibe could get transmitted that way, but not individual thoughts and ideas that are sometimes reported. So that's what's so exciting now, is that there's more and more work to figure out these things that had been taboo for a long time. Many religious traditions, spiritual traditions addressed, for example, distant prayer, intercessory prayer. That was actually one of the first, might have been the first research study in the late 70s, was a group of prayers, healers here in this town, prayed, they had a list of patients. They just had the names who were in a cardiac unit. I don't remember where it was. I think it was in it doesn't really matter actually. But and the results showed that the people who were prayed for had shorter hospital stays, fewer medications, things like that. They recovered more quickly. And, obviously very controversial. And there's been a lot of replications, because it's very important in science to be able to reproduce a study so that it's not just something that was unique for that particular doctor or that hospital or whatever. And some of the replications have been successful and others haven't. And that helps to show what the key features are. Like in the original study, the prayers used what was part of their spiritual tradition. And I don't know remember the details, but it was something that they were familiar with and was very heartfelt for them. In one of the replications, they were all given the same text to read in the interest of making it uniform, but it sacrificed that sort of sense of integrity that was so important in the first study. So maybe that's you just let them do whatever means the most to them, rather than have it a uniform prayer.
Well, yeah, and if you're just reading off of a sheet, I think that's different than something that's coming from your heart.
Exactly. Yeah. For sure.
I like it. We're speaking with Dr. Rick Leskowitz, and we are talking about The Mystery of Life Energy, which is also the title of his new book. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. You're listening to or watching Answers Network.
Conflict International are experts at uncovering the truth. Our specialist team has decades of experience in providing a range of bespoke investigation and intelligence services to companies and individuals. Whether you need professional screening or background checks of employees, due diligence of potential clients or business partners, asset tracing services, or surveillance, Conflict International has a rapid response team on hand to get you to the heart of the matter. Our key strength is in our global capabilities. We can tap into an extensive network of trusted professional investigators based in most jurisdictions worldwide, enabling us to go almost anywhere a case takes us. Conflict International has decades of experience with a diverse range of skills among our team, developed from backgrounds in military and security intelligence services, as well as practiced lawyers. Visit our website today at conflictinternational.com to find out more about our services. That's conflictinternational.com. Global reach, local knowledge.
And we're back. You're listening to or watching Answers Network, and we're talking about life energy. So, Rick, you've talked about the fact that, I mean, you've been doing this for a very, very long time. We've changed as a society. We're looking at things differently. What are some of the biggest changes or growth steps that you've seen over the years?
Well, in terms of medical training, for example, meditation is part of the curriculum that students are required to learn. In Harvard, for example, Harvard Medical School has had a very big presence for mind-body medicine, thanks to Herb Benson, who was the cardiologist in the early 80s who promoted the relaxation response. That was the first really scientific approach to mind affecting body. And it's developed to the point where students learn how to meditate as part of their training.
Well, but let me ask, were they learning meditation on how to de-escalate themselves, or how to to keep themselves from burning out? Or was it something that was taught as something they can pass on to their clients?
Well, both, actually.
Okay,
it's actually acknowledging that it's a kind of a amazing revelation, but doctors are human, and they experience stress too, just like their patients. So
yeah.
the practice can certainly benefit them. And there's more awareness now of physician burnout. It's a very difficult environment now because it's become corporatized and computerized, and it's not the just person-to-person interaction the way it used to be. So it's very important for doctors to have that skill themselves, but also to teach their patients. Lifestyle medicine is big, so to say more than just, well, you should exercise more. Here's a program that will help you, or that it's much more better understood and better integrated into their treatment approaches. So that's a big change in the curriculum. If you're talking about the culture as a whole, one other thing is for the healing part. One of the hands-on healing approaches is called Reiki.
Yes.
And it's become very popular in the community. You don't need years and years of training to at least get a baseline level of skills. So it's very common for it's happened now. It started in Boston actually, but it's spread nationwide that hospitals will open up their doors to volunteer healers from the community to come in the evening and give free treatments to patients and staff. And it started out with a pilot study at I think it was Brigham and Women's in Boston, and it proved so popular that it just spread and spread and spread. And they offer trainings, and in our hospital we had some outside funding to pay for trainings for staff, and a lot of the resident doctors, the doctor trainees, took this program. And as I'm talking to you, I realize I still can't believe that doctors are being trained to use their own biofield to help patients. It's fabulous. It's really
I think it's great.
Yeah.
Now, is there a particular clinical syndrome that has given you the greatest insights into the nature of life energy?
I would have to say yes. I worked, as you mentioned, in chronic pain for many years, and we saw a whole wide range of things. A lot of them were after injuries or musculoskeletal strain, things like that. And we used what we call the team approach to help people become more functional. And many, many people benefited. But there were some patients who had a unique kind of pain that got me really interested. It's the pain that happens after an amputation, where people feel not only that they can still feel their leg or whatever, but that it's very, very painful. And the medicines and nerve blocks don't help them the way they help other people. So we've had a few patients in our program. It wasn't a huge number, but coming through. And there's one fellow in particular I still remember vividly because the regular stuff wasn't working. So I asked him if he'd like to try something different, just balance your energy, which, he didn't really care what it was. He wanted to try anything. So he lay down on his back on the examining table. And I did this smoothing out thing. It's called therapeutic touch, which Actually, for those of you who can, viewers who can see it, if you bring your hands close and farther apart, palms facing each other, at some point, usually maybe a foot apart, you can feel something. And if you close your eyes, you can sense it more clearly. It's, some people feel it as like a pressure or a tingling. So, what is that? And my understanding and the way it's taught now is that your energy field has a boundary on this hand and on this hand. And at a certain distance, the two boundaries literally bump into each other, and you can feel that. You have the capability of sensing these subtle energy sensations. So I was doing that to just kind of suss them out and start to smooth out the problems. But you normally do the entire body. I knew he was missing a leg, and yet for some reason I continued down that side with the same sensing technique, same sensing approach. And much to my surprise, I could feel that same pressure feeling even where his leg was gone. And it wasn't what I was expecting because I hadn't even thought it through. So that was one mind-boggling thing. The other was he opened his eyes and said, "What are you doing, Doc?" Because he could feel me touching his phantom leg.
Wow.
So, the medical model can't come close to explaining that because there weren't any nerves within a foot or two of his foot. So something was going on. And that's really when the biofield idea really took hold for me, that there is something out there. Most of us can't see it with our eyes. I was able to feel it that time with my hands, but that's where the pain comes from. And if you can work with the energy that's stuck in the biofield, then if it clears out, and which actually did with him, I could, as I smoothed it out, he could feel it draining out. It felt to him like there was a valve at the bottom of his foot, and it was draining out the bottom. He didn't know about acupuncture meridians, but there's an acupuncture point exactly where he was showing me that he could feel the energy drain out. So for things like phantom limb pain, it's possible to do an energy balancing that's very, very helpful. And that this one takes a little, you need a practitioner to do it to you, but there's also ways of balancing your own energy field that were particularly helpful for phantom pain, because these approaches dealt with the emotional part of the pain. You can imagine if you have an amputation, that's very traumatic, not just having the surgery, but looking at yourself and you're missing your hand or whatever. That is usually not addressed by surgeons. That's not their area. So there's a really wonderful energy balancing technique called emotional freedom technique, or EFT, which people may know of as tapping, because it involves tapping on, the patient taps on their own acupuncture points while they're thinking about and talking about different aspects of their situation, along the lines of, even though I still have this pain, I accept myself fully and completely. So the idea of self-acceptance is a really big one. But then the tapping, somehow it leads to this experience that we've all had of when you release some emotion and you kind of go, ooh, like that. That's a really big part of the healing process, because it does help to expel some of the stuck energy, the stuck prana. So I come to think that technique is really helpful for not just for phantom pain, but for other pains where the energy is stuck in different ways. And then with phantom pain, the question was, I could feel it. There are some people who have these psychic gifts who could actually see the phantom with their eyes. One particularly well-known healer, Donna Eden, describes in her book how she treated somebody with phantom limb pain by putting her hands where the acupuncture meridian was blocked in the phantom. So her hand was in empty space. Looked, ridiculous, but she could pull out the energy and balance it that way. So it's great, but wouldn't it be nice if you could just take a photograph of the phantom and show the skeptics that there's something really there. So that's been something I've gotten involved with research-wise over the last 5 or 10 years too, because there are energy sensing devices, and you can measure sort of the general magnetic field, but that just gives you a sense that the body is emitting something. This is really different. This is more like a template for the body. So the technique called Curlian photography has been popular off and on over the years. That's hard to adapt because the way the pictures are taken, it has to be something thin that fits between the two plates where the electrical discharge goes. So things like a leaf is a really good subject. So you've probably seen pictures of the leaf with what they call a corona around it, where the energy.
Mhm.
So this was a while ago now, like 40 years ago or something. What would happen if you cut the tip off the leaf? What happens to that corona? And believe it or not, the corona is still there, even though the leaf is gone. This is a picture of it from the cover of a book from that era, which hopefully viewers can see. And you can see that it's as if nothing had happened, even though that part of the leaf is gone. So the idea is that the energy, whether it's prana or whatever you want to call it, is there pre-existing, and the leaf grows around it. That it's the blueprint that the leaf follows. And there's actually a good analogy that really helped me kind of buy into it more fully. And that goes back to probably in 7th grade. You did that experiment with iron filings and a magnet. You sprinkle them on a piece of paper with a magnet underneath.
Mhm.
There's
I
this
remember.
really beautiful geometric pattern that you couldn't see beforehand, but the filings line up in accordance to what they call the lines of force. If you brush away some of the iron filings, the lines of force are still there, even though you can't see the iron filings anymore. And I think that's a really very close analogy, because, like, let's say the cells in your hand are, each cell is like an iron filing, and it lines up and grows in accordance with this invisible life energy template, or acupuncture meridians, or chakras, or whatever the components are. So it's there.
Yeah. First of all, I got to tell you that I love the way in which you're explaining this, because I think this is an area that I've tried to wrap my head around, and nobody's really explained it the way in which you do, both now on the show and in your book, which I think is incredible, because there are people that I know who use energy healers, and I will ask, well, how does that work? And they go, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I go, well, don't you ask them? And they go, they don't really explain it. They just say it works, so it works.
Yeah.
Anyway. And so
and for some people, it doesn't even matter what the explanation is, as long as it works. That's what they're most interested in.
Right.
Fair enough to them.
But this to me is just so valuable, because, and maybe I kind of have that scientific mind also. So it's like, give me a visual, give me an explanation that I can wrap my brain around. Now, we've been going through a lot of how this stuff works with our body. Let's talk a little bit about how this works with the planet. So, for instance, once a year, my sweetheart and I go to Sedona, and so when we go through, we have great hikes, and Sedona has this reputation of having great vortexes, and there are times in which you can feel something's different. There's something else going on. There's a tingling going on. Share how this same type of biofield or energy is different at different places as far as the Earth is concerned.
Well, that's a great example. Sedona certainly is known for that. Just quickly, from a scientific point of view, it would be interesting if you were blindfolded and brought to some place out there, and you don't know whether you're on a vortex or miles away. Does it feel different to you? That would
love the way you think, by the way.
I mean, I think it's really important to have the experience when you know what it is, because then you can really feel it full-fledged, but then you can sort of test it out and see. But to go back to the question of Earth and the Earth energies, there are some good pictures. The website for the book has some good illustrations for everything from phantom limb to this, and it's themysteryoflifeenergy.com, just for people who want to check it out. But the idea is that all living things have energy. The book has a diagram of an acupuncture map for a horse, because veterinarians use acupuncture on horses. So the stretch would be, well, indigenous peoples talk about the earth as a living being. Does Gaia have her own energy network?
Mhm.
And lo and behold, you find from all these different traditions these ideas of earth energy, whether it's feng shui and traditional Chinese medicine, or what they call geomancy in the West. My wife is British, so I've had a chance to go to England a lot, and it happens that Southern England has a lot of these PowerPoints, not like Sedona. It's for example, where Stonehenge is located,
Mhm.
or another even larger stone circle, larger in area, called Avebury. They've been known for a long time to have this particular quality to them. And a British surveyor, just an amateur, he would walk the countryside. He was on a hilltop and he noticed that this holy well here and that stone circle there, and then the chapel in the distance, they were all in a straight line. And he began to wonder, is that just a coincidence or what? And he mapped it out, and he found that there was what he called the old straight track, that a lot of these special places were linked in a line. And work has continued over the years to find that there are these literal energy meridians in the earth, on the earth's surface, that can be mapped out. And it's very strange because you see pick a map of Southern England with these 8 or 10 points highlighted. It looks just like an acupuncture map. And people who go there feel the energy. You know about the often in America we'll see, like, at the summer solstice, the druids, modern day druids, will gather and do ceremony there. That's because if you really get into the energetics of it, there's daily fluctuations, seasonal fluctuations, and certain times of the year are most auspicious for working with the energy of the place. So they will do ceremonies to magnify the energy. It's not quite like acupressure, putting physical pressure on it, but human intention. If there's ceremonial dancing or chanting, that will also affect the vibrations. So for whatever reason, that whole part of Southern England is very rich in these PowerPoints. And what's happened more recently over the last, especially 20, 30 years, is in the fields around, this is mostly agrarian, so there's a lot of wheat field, barley fields. People began noticing that overnight, these formations would become apparent in the fields where the wheat lies down some of the places and is up others. And the contrast from a hilltop, you can see a geometric shape. They originally were just simple circles and lines like that, and so they were called crop circles.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it sounds like you're describing the crop circles.
It is, and the early ones are very primitive. They'd just be like a ring around it. And at that point, the explanation was there's a couple of retired farmers who said that they were making it by dragging a plank of wood and stomping on the wheat and knocking it over, and that was it. And the media went with that, and they said, okay, mystery solved, on to the next thing. But over the years, the designs have gotten so complicated and so beautiful. I'm just, mind-boggling that explanation doesn't work, especially because the wheat is intact. Some of them are bent straight over at the base. Some of the wheat grows in segments, and some of them, the first segment is vertical, and then at the node it bends over, and it's rigid there. It's not like cracked. It's somehow, it's like somebody made the analogy to like glass that it melted and reformed at a new angle. So we have no way of actually. This is it's hard to know. This is a picture from a crop circle calendar, and maybe viewers can get a sense that there is quite a complicated geometry to it. That it's just, I like having it as a calendar. And then, as far as what happens up close, I have, this is a photograph that I took from inside a crop circle. And let me just say, I had similar experience to you in Sedona, that inside the circle, you really feel something. You don't know what it is. I did not do the blindfold experiment to see what happens. Although there are some crop circles that are known to be made by hoaxers, and they're public about it. And it does feel different. To be honest, it does feel kind of just flat. I mean, it's just like normal.
Just fake. Yeah, it comes off fake.
Let me just show this one. There's one picture of it's hard to finding it hard to aim to the camera. This
Mhm.
is one of the tufts that it's about 2.5 feet tall, and you can see that each individual stalk on the ground is laid out in a spiral, but in this conical shape thing, it's like a swirl around. And I don't even know how, if you had hours to do it, I don't even know how you do it. So let alone that it appears overnight is just food for thought.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break, a quick break, but I want to tell people that are out there, if you're listening and you hear we're holding up pictures or something like that, you can also go to the website. You can click over onto YouTube or something like that to where you can see these things as well. When we come back, we have a question that's coming in that has to do with global consciousness. So stay with us. We'll be right back. You're listening to or watching Answers Network. Having a teenager at risk who is going through a traumatic experience can be difficult on parents, siblings, and all who are working with that young person. No family should have to go through this process alone. West Shield Adolescent Services is here to ensure you don't have to. Many of the psychologists and psychiatrists we work with have spoken about the stress families go through. Not just the young person, but the parents, needing to get their child to a program where they can get the help they need. West Shield aims to lessen that stress. Every case goes through a thorough intake process with one of our knowledgeable, compassionate intake coordinators. We want to know the likes, the dislikes, and the fears of each child. This important information is taken into consideration when choosing the best suited team member for each individual teenager. West Shield agents come from all different walks of life, giving us a diverse group of team members to ensure a personalized, compassionate experience for every teenager. This allows us to make certain every young person we work with gets to the chosen program in the best possible state of mind. We contacted over 600 of the youth we've worked with in the past to see where they're at now. 97% of these individuals told us how much their lives had improved, that they had better relationships with their friends and families, had gone on to marry, have kids, and were now using the skills they learned in their program to raise their own children. Our role of transporting at-risk teenagers is a vital step in the process of ensuring a youth's ability to thrive in their new environment, and is a role we don't take lightly. The recovery process can be a long one, but like any journey, it started with a single step. And we're back. Our guest book is The Mystery of Life Energy. We have a quick question. We've only got a couple of minutes. This one reads, I too believe in global consciousness. Why do you think we are going through such global turmoil at this time? And what do you think we can or should do or should be doing to reverse the current negative trends? And this is from Matthew from Orlando, Florida.
Well, that's the big question, because it really does seem like things are coming to a head here. And, maybe every era, every time people think that's happening with them, but this is a sort of different order of magnitude. And I do think it's the energies are rising for whatever reason. It might be just enough people are sort of waking up, if you will, or tapping into this stuff, that it's happening. And the brighter the light, the darker the shadow that it illuminates. So a lot of our unresolved issues, the shadow work, is coming to the surface for us to deal with, and hopefully we'll be able to resolve it, because I think humans do have the potential to live together in peace and harmony. And there's just a lot of this negativity has been ingrained. And a key to getting there is the realizing that we are all interconnected by this energy field or consciousness field, or whatever term you want to give it. And it probably doesn't get as much recognition as it could or as it should, because there are a lot of events that happen around the world, like a global meditation day or a sound healing day, that we know cognitively thousands of people participate in. But now there's evidence that it registers on computers. There's a a group out of Princeton many years ago found that a computer spewing out random ones and zeros can be influenced by a human thought. And if those computers are spread in a global network, that will register when there are times of more coherence than others. I first found out about this work when I was doing a project on team chemistry in sports and focused on the Boston Red Sox, our baseball team, the Joy of Sox. We did some measurements in the lab of people coming into alignment, and also across the whole ballpark, even when they were far away. There are video clips that people can watch on the website for the book, the Joy of Sox. No, that's another one.
Yes.
The mysteryoflifeenergy.com. If you go to resources, you can watch the whole movie. It's an hour, but you can also watch the segment on entraining positive emotions, for example. And that just it shows we're all interconnected. And I think the main reason for our current turmoil is that we don't realize that we're all in this together, that we have so much of the us versus them mentality that the media feeds. I mean, the media really has a very negative influence these days, that it's not mostly interested in presenting the information. It's creating turmoil because that sells.
Exactly. I actually couldn't have said it any better. And again, I think it's something everybody needs to pay attention to.
Yeah.
That they don't make more money if everything goes well. So yes, I appreciate that. I'm looking up. We're out of time. Rick, I got to tell you, I love this. I wish we had another hour. If we can set up something to have you come back, because this to me is a great topic, and that I think more people should know about. But at the same time, folks, you can get the book. The book explains so much of this, and I think one of the things I got from it is I think it tells people to think.
Yeah.
Think. Don't sit there and stare at something and let somebody tell you what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Think. There's so many things you can pull from within, and I really appreciate it, Rick. Thank you so much for the book. And again, for anybody out there, if you're driving and you can't write down things, we will have where to get the book. We'll have Rick's website. We'll have it all in our show notes. And again, Rick, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Alan, and thanks again for inviting me to be on your show. I appreciate it.
All right. For everybody out there, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you click the like button. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, make sure you subscribe to the show. It'll get sent to you automatically. Or you can check out our other shows on our YouTube channel, or you can go to our website, which is answers.network, or you can reach us on any other social platform. Next week, we're going to be joined by Marion Carlin as he discusses the power of the mind. So it's a continuation of what we're doing today. This, I think, will be another great show. Thanks for tuning in. For everybody out there, be good human beings, and be with us again next week on Answers Network.
You're listening to Answers Network with Alan Cardoza, only on LA Talk Radio.